Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel, Kindred Souls of Brooklyn and Sarasota. And just a quick little different video for today. Everyone who watches my channel knows I'm a huge Elton John fan, and so is my son Matt. Thankfully, right? Always good to have your own child play things you grew up with. So, just a really quick video on why his music changed so much after 1975. You know, when we think about Elton John, we think about all the iconic records pretty much of the 70s. Now, I love Elton John, all of his records, but there was a significant change in his music after 1975 or in 1975. So stay tuned and I'll tell you why that was. So while Elton John continues to be a super headliner, Elton John himself will tell you that the peak of his career was 1975 when he played the concert at Dodger Stadium, which of course when he had his Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour, that was his last show in America. Now, what was so significant and unfortunate about that concert, and to me, was that the band that comprised of himself, Nigel Olsson, Dee Murray, and Davey Johnstone did not show up at that show. In fact, Elton John in 1975 had completely changed his band. Now, the last album or the last song that that group pretty much appeared to was the original incarnation of the Elton John Band, which he actually changed the name of in the 70s. If you look at a lot of the 45s, it says the Elton John Band. The last song that they really worked on was Pinball Wizard, which was 1975, which was the song from the movie Tommy. So for some odd reason, and a reason which Nigel Olsson to this day, or Davey Johnstone, Dee Murray passed away, to this day, they really don't know why Elton John just decided to switch things up in 1975 and basically fired them. Now, they came back, and of course, Nigel still plays with Elton. Davey came back to play with Elton. But the sound was never the same because in 1975, Elton John wanted a more rock and roll sound on his albums, on his records. So pretty much, if you listen to all of the Elton John music that you've probably grown up with, and if you think of the classic Elton John songs that dominate the airwaves, his biggest hits, they were pretty much before this change of the band in 1975. And another significant factor which happened in 1975, and if you've seen the Elton John movie, you'll probably remember this if you're just a casual fan, was that Elton John really started hitting the drugs heavy in 1975. And that pretty much started with the Rock of the Westies album. And that was a decent album. It had songs Island Girl. It had Grow Some Funk of Your Own. Dan Dare wasn't a bad song. But certainly nowhere near the comparison of the albums before, which included Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Captain Fantastic, and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, over and over and over, all the original albums starting back in 1969 or 68. So the drugs started very heavy in 1975, and they continued for Elton all the way up to 1990. And so it was 15 years of kind of like a blur in a sense for him. And he did some commercial records in the 80s that if you watch him in interviews, he'll tell you that. But he really, it was kind of a blur that whole period. And it wasn't until 1990 that Elton John, and you know, again, you could see this in his interviews, when did he know it was time to stop taking so many drugs was when he was actually in a hotel room and it was a really bad day. It was raining really, really hard. And he was so conked out by drugs was that he actually called the front desk of the hotel and he said, make this weather stop. You have to change the weather. I'm really unhappy. You have to do something with the weather. And then it dawned on him how bad he was at that point. And that's when he decided to go into a clinic. And it was funny because, no, it wasn't funny, but the clinic that he went into was the Betty Ford Clinic, because a lot of people don't know this. He went into Betty Ford because it was the only clinic in the world that could help him. He had like a three-prong addiction. He had an alcohol addiction, he had a drug addiction, and he said he also had like a sex and a food addiction as well. So it was the only clinic in the world that could really help him at the time. And that's what he ended up doing. And many months later, he emerged much better. And he pretty much over the years has stayed off of the hard drugs and alcohol and things like that. And his music, it's the only way he's pretty much survived to this point. So, Liz, I know what you might be thinking. You might be saying, "Well, Al, what about Elton John's voice situation? What happened? Isn't that why maybe his music changed?" Now, it did. Now, again, here's a misconception about Elton John's voice problems, which pretty much came to a highlight or a climax in 1986. Which, if you listen to his Live in Australia album, his voice was horrendous at that point, and it was on that tour that he went to a doctor. And many people think, and I could attest to the fact, Elton John, show wise, absolutely fantastic. To this day, nobody performs 3-hour shows the way he does. I mean, think about, and I love Elvis, but you think about Elvis, a 70-minute show. You think of other performers, they have other people open up for him. Elton John always played like a 3-hour show, always played a long show. So did he kind of blow out his voice a little bit like that? Absolutely. I'm sure it definitely affected him. But the real reason why, and he did have a surgery and for the voice, for the vocal cords, and as a result of that, he had to sing at different octaves, and he's not able to hit the high notes anymore. Obviously, he had to change his way of singing. But I'm going to tell you the real culprit as to why his voice was destroyed, because he went to a doctor and they actually fixed his vocal cords. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, and I can tell you this because my son was a musician, and my son liked to smoke, but my son was a guitar player. That's one of his guitar players right there, right? My son passed in 2019. It's hard to always talk about it. He was only 27, but for musicians, any musician will tell you they play better when they smoke marijuana. I mean, think about Paul McCartney. I mean, longtime smoker. Lots of songs have been dedicated to it. Gotta Get You Into My Life. Not about a girl coming into his life. It's about marijuana. But essentially, what it's bad for is singers. And Elton John went on tour that year in 1986. His voice was blown out. Yeah, the vocal cord thing. But the first thing his doctor told him when he went to a doctor in Australia was that you're smoking too much marijuana. That's the problem. And so even though they fixed his vocal cords, it was the marijuana that really killed his voice, and it kills the voice of a lot of singers. So if you're out there and you're a musician, I can't really say I endorse it, and it's difficult because marijuana is so frequent out there. It's so weird, in this day and age. My wife said something the other day when I had a sore throat. She was, it's so weird. You can't get amoxicillin anymore because they say it's overprescribed, but you can go down to any corner, any store, and get any kind of CBD thing or gummies or whatever. I'll tell you, as a musician's dad and as the founder of the Waffles Foundation, if you could avoid all that stuff, it's great. Better if you can. If you're a singer, I'd say super avoid it because it's definitely going to kill your voice. And you could research it. And sure, I'm not endorsing you to do anything else. I mean, yeah, if you're going to do something like that because it's better than doing some of the harder stuff. But just know if you're a singer, it's going to kill your voice. So anyway, not to be too preachy, this is a video about Elton John, and I just figured I'd weigh in on it and really talk about why his music changed so much after 1975. And, and I'll tell you one more thing about Elton, which is kind of funny. And it's kind of a thing that, Elton is kind of his worst enemy when it comes to music. I mean, Elton John is such a music fan himself. He also kind of changed his music a little bit because the trend of, folksy type of songs and like that. It's also when John Denver kind of went downhill because people were kind of, the Vietnam War ended and music tastes were changing and, disco was coming in. But Elton John is such a big music fan that it's kind of like he'll go with whatever musical trend. Like, to take the song Philadelphia Freedom, right? Everybody knows that song was written by Bernie Taupin for Billie Jean King. It was one of the only songs that Elton ever said to Bernie, I want you to write me a song about this, about Billie Jean King's soccer club, her tennis club called the Philadelphia Freedoms. And that's how that came about. But Elton John loved the Philly sound. And so he's kind of his worst enemy with that because rather than keeping that trend going, he just kind of goes with the musical trends. But then again, maybe he's right because you can't be singing the same songs forever. I mean, Elton John also said himself he always felt bad for bands like Hootie and the Blowfish who they just sang for 3 or 4 years off the same album. And, so Elton John has always been cutting edge, and, he's probably one of the biggest music fans out there. I think in 1975 or 1976, I think he had the largest record collection in England, and I think he's still got, not about records, but he's got a very comprehensive collection of records, and he could tell you better than anyone what trends are going on, what's happening in music. Because he's always active on tour, he's doing different things. That part of it gets underutilized, but it's a pretty fascinating story. So anyway, thanks for hanging on to this video, and I thought I'd share some Elton John knowledge out there. All of the things that I said are available online. Go on YouTube, you could research them. I figured maybe I'd save you some time, or I would point you in the right direction as to why Elton John's music changed so much after 1975. So hope you have a good day out there and a good night. And Saturday night's all right for fighting. And we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.